it's impossible to predict the future, but the past has showed us that in this situation, guys transfer out and look for another place to try and compete to play. A more tenable situation, whether it's at a college, perhaps at a lower level, a Mountain West school. Maybe for Brown, who could go back out to the West Coast, or same for Keenholz. He's from South Dakota, I guess. That a school at, I don't want to say a lower level, but not a Power Four conference team, or perhaps another Four conference team that is looking for guys to compete, somewhere. But class does start on Monday. And if those guys are in class at Ohio State, I would expect them to go through spring drills. And Brown, obviously, he's hurt again. His left foot was in a boot as he was leaving the stadium. And, we caught a few comments with him after the game, and he just noted how tough it was on Lincoln Keenholz to go in that situation. And, the offensive line, obviously, for Ohio State, we thought early in the season that it wasn't going to be very good. Then they improved, and Ohio State was much better, probably, week 7 to 11. But then the Michigan game, they were outplayed, I think, by Michigan's defensive front, which got some pretty consistent pressure on Kyle McCord. And then obviously there was a shakeup for the Cotton Bowl. They didn't play Carson Hinsman. The reason, Ryan Day said, was that Hinsman had struggled in practice. A lot of people have surmised that this was actually a suspension of sorts, that he was a healthy scratch because he had said some things in a podcast that maybe rubbed the coaches the wrong way. Some behind the curtains type stuff that, Ohio State doesn't pay its offensive linemen through NIL like maybe they should, or I don't even know what all was said, but they kind of cut their nose off to spite their face with this one, because they put Matthew Jones at center, and here the center makes all the line calls, and Carson Hinsman had done that all season, and either Jones wasn't making the proper calls or they couldn't execute the calls that he was making. One way or the other, it didn't work. Had I been the coach after the first quarter, I would have said, okay, the lesson's been learned. Carson, grab your helmet. You're going back in at center. Matthew Jones, you're going back to guard. Let's try it. Let's try a different look. Give up 3 sacks in the first quarter, and they stayed with that. That's called cutting your nose off to spite your face. I got to let my dog out here. He's going crazy. But I have one or two more thoughts about this.
All right, because I'll basically say this, in addition to what Steve had to say about that offensive line situation, that we don't necessarily know the bottom of it, although Steve certainly let us know. But yeah, I just think that every time they run the replay and you get the look at, okay, what happened on this particular play? It was offensive line related. There's 2 basic things that happen. Either you can tell that there was some kind of missed assignment, like why is the tackle staying inside when somebody's shooting right off the edge and as a clear shot at the quarterback, or hey, that left tackle just got whipped. That's all there was to it. He just got beat around the corner. The end was able to bend low and get around the corner quickly and force something. So I think there was a little bit of both there, it seemed.
Yeah. Excuse me there. Their pass protection scheme for this game was just not what it needed to be. And that's very unfortunate, obviously. Lee Tressel was Jim Tressel's dad, was a national championship coach at Baldwin Wallace. And he's been attributed to the phrase that the discipline of the starter shall be commensurate to the quality of his backup. And I think after the first quarter, I think we could have surmised that the backup, just in that alignment that they had with Enoch Vamahi at right guard and Matthew Jones at center, just wasn't going to get it done. And moreover, there was a play that was clipped and put on the internet where Vamahi, Missouri, in one of the rare times they went with the 4-man rush, Vamahi got beat at right guard. Then Josh Fryer got beat at right tackle. And then finally, Josh Simmons got beat at left tackle. And their three defenders all met at Lincoln Kienholz at the same time. And it's like, you want to, you put a guy who's never really played very many snaps in a situation like that, and you have three veteran guys who don't handle their business. Now, I say veteran, Vamahi's hardly ever played in his career. Two veteran guys, the two tackles, Simmons and Fryer, who don't handle their business. And again, how could you possibly know what Lincoln Kienholz and Devin Brown can and can't do? Brown, he got injured on a running play in the first quarter, and they left him in, I think, for the next series, and he got blindsided. Simmons turned his guy loose off left tackle, and he gets just absolutely killed. Jimmy Walker Jr., I think, was the lineman for Missouri who made the play. And it just, he's limping coming off the field. He went to the back, got treatment, presumably may have even had an x-ray done because the doctor went with him. And I presume that the doctor, Chris Kading, was going to read the x-ray. And so, yeah, it just, I don't even know what to say. Just, it was a cascade of events. The coaching staff did nothing to help the team overcome Missouri's pass rush, and the players that were on the field weren't good enough to overcome it. So, just a perfect storm. And again, not indicative of what Ohio State did all season. I don't think you see that type of a game plan if Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. are out there, certainly, or Hinsman. I think it looks a little bit different. I mean, you're missing three-year starters there. No Mayan Williams, no Chip Trayanum to help with pass blocking. Cade Stover, the tight end, was limited in what he could do because of injury. So it just really was, a perfect storm of things that got away from him, and just the way it all worked out.
David asking about possibly whether this is a do or die season for one Justin Fry as the offensive line coach. And then, of course, Brian Hartline, who just took over as offensive coordinator, and the dynamic there with Ryan Day calling plays and so forth.
Yeah, very interesting discussion there. Fry's only been on the job 2 years. And again, this is only a question that Ryan Day in his mind and in his heart of hearts can answer. Does he think Fry is competent enough to get this turned around? Is Fry a good enough recruiter to get them back to the material that they need? You go back to Paris Johnson, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whatever it was, and now he's in the National Football League as a rookie with Arizona. They have not recruited very well on the offensive line. Some of that was Greg Studrawa, and some of that has been, very honestly, Justin Fry. They do have one blue chip offensive lineman coming in Ian Moore. And then, I don't want to call them projects, but three guys that are going to have to develop. And that's Van Sickle and Deontay and Devontae Armstrong. So we'll see what comes of that. They're redshirting three guys off the team this year: Josh Padilla, Austin Sierraveld, and Miles Walker. Are any of them going to pan out eventually? And again, to me, as you go into the spring, Donovan Jackson, if he does opt to return, which I think he's probably leaning in that direction, I would say he's probably locked in at left guard. The other four spots need to be wide open. And certainly the right guard spot, Matthew Jones, his time at Ohio State's done. So you're going to have at least one new starter. Could that be Tegratash Bola? Could that be Luke Montgomery? Those are the two names that kind of come to my mind, first of all, when I'm looking for because those guys played quite a bit as the visiting sixth lineman when they went to the jumbo package. So I think that that kind of tells you where things stand with that. I'm not sure Vamahi is the answer based off what I saw in this game. Fry last spring talked about how Vamahi was playing at a starter's level and that he really had 6 starters instead of just 5. Well, I didn't see it from Vamahi, and I don't think anybody really did in this game. As I said, in that one play with the 4-man rush, he was the first guy. It was like a race to see who could turn their guy loose first. And it was Vamahi for the win, Simmons or Fryer for the place, and the left tackle Simmons for show. So and it wasn't a good competition. So they got to do better. They need better. They got to do better. And to me, what they really need is to go out in the portal and find 2 guys the caliber of Jonah Jackson, who came in from Rutgers after spring football, as I recall. That I believe it was after spring football that year, 3 or 4 years ago, and came in and played at nearly an all Big Ten level for the Buckeyes. And I believe he's still in the NFL with Detroit, I think. Maybe not Detroit, but another team. That's the caliber of player they need to go out and get in the portal. Somebody who's going to come in and start and play at a near all Big Ten level, because the offensive line is not a national or even Big Ten championship caliber offensive line as it's constituted today. You got to go find some help. And I do believe these guys who played this year got something out of this and can now build off of this with film study and continued strength training and agility training and everything else. It was, one of the questions that came up to me was, you have these guys that are so big at the guard position, they're really not as effective when you try and pull them from one side to the other to kick out and to lead the running back, on that type of a counter or whatever. It's just not an effective blocking scheme for them. And perhaps maybe they need to look at the makeup of some of the offensive linemen that they have. And obviously, it's not a fair fight when Missouri puts 8 or 9 men in the box. You have 5 people, maybe a tight end to block 7 or 8 guys. It's not a fair fight. And there was nothing Ohio State did to counter that. So strikes back to David's question here. I think Fry, if you ask me, I think Fry's coming back. I think he needs a 3rd year to show whether he is or isn't the guy. And again, only Day can answer that. New offensive coordinator, they're not taking Brian Hartline out of that role. What does that mean? Well, I'm trying not to use a double negative, but it doesn't mean that they can't go out and get somebody who's a guru in terms of perhaps a quarterback position and a guy perhaps who's a former offensive coordinator who can assist you with game planning and can assist the head coach with his play calling duties on game day. And again, that's not clipping Brian Hartline's wings. That's just the fact of the matter. They missed Kevin Wilson in the worst way possible this year for any number of reasons. And Dave Biddle, who works on our site, after the game made the comment, they were missing the adult in the room, the guy who could counter some of what Ryan Day wanted to do at times. A guy that take an idea that Brian Hartline has and refine it and finish it, polish it, and say, this is how it's got to go. And then go out on the field and execute it. And man, that's 20-yard gain, that type thing. I mean, there was a disconnect one way or the other. For them not to have a plan to overcome what Missouri was doing with screens or draws or counters or anything, quick slants, 3-step drop, get the ball out. They just stood in the pocket and let the pocket collapse around them. It just made no sense. They tried to run into an 8-man box. It made no sense. So I haven't gone back and watched that game. I don't know if I ever will. I don't know what I could really learn from it. But they were just overwhelmed by the circumstance. And for them to have gone into that game and not assumed that Missouri was going to pull out all the stops and come after Brown, and then certainly come after Keenholz, redouble their efforts to come after Keenholz, then boy, oh boy, that was coaching malpractice at the highest level. So, not a lot of good positive thought there about the offensive coaching staff right now. Could Corey Dennis be the guy going out at quarterback? And as we said, bring in a quarterback guru and a guy that can help the head coach with his play calling and his game planning. There's some traction with that one. Certainly, Fleming, the special teams coach, the special teams, one last farce on special teams. If that was his swan song, he certainly went out in a blaze of glory with a delay of game penalty on the first punt, the first minute of the game. And Day caught on camera looking over at him, say, "Come on, man. What, Parker, what are we doing?" Type thing. He covered for him in the post game. He said, "Well, we had a look we didn't like. We've always told him, don't snap it if you don't like the look." It's like you had 6 days to snap the ball, and it never got snapped. So whatever. But, Mark, have you ever seen a team on special teams? And granted, they had a lot of guys go in the portal. They had 15 guys go in the portal before the game and 3 more after the game. 18 guys have gone in the portal. And I assume that at least a few of those guys were mainstays on special teams. Some of those defensive backs and different guys like a Jair Brown. I just throw him out there that he went in, and some other guys they're so memorable I can't remember them. Julian Fleming, certainly, he was probably on some special teams. So when that happens in the bowl game, you have a bunch of guys who didn't play all season out there on special teams. So there's going to be mistakes. But when everybody in the stadium knows that the team is punting, the opponent is punting, and your returner, Buka, is going to fair catch nearly every punt that's coming his way. I'm going to fair catch it. 70,000 people in the stadium knows going to fair catch it. Why? In God's name, is anybody on the return team touching anybody on the coverage team anywhere close to where it could even be possibly construed as a block in the back penalty? Why? Who are you blocking? There's no tackle that any of those guys that you're blocking are going to go make because he's fair catching the freaking punt. One more farce. One more special teams farce.
Yeah. It's a good point. I'll add this to the offensive line discussion. We saw 2 games played at the highest level on Monday night, and I have always said that as a general rule, the offensive line is the most important unit on the field, and it's the most difficult to coordinate.
Urban Meyer said we are an offensive line-driven program. When they won the national championship, he said we are an offensive line-driven program. And they didn't have 5-star offensive linemen. They had a few, but they had Elfline and Jacoby Boren. Jacoby Boren is like in the dictionary next to 3-star, they have a picture of Jacoby Boren. It was development. Ed Warner was a great offensive line coach. He was not a very good offensive coordinator, but he was a very good offensive line coach. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great point. The quarterback's the most important position, but if you want to take the entire unit, I still believe it's offensive line by and large, generally. And the most difficult to coordinate because guys can play different positions. You got to find the best combination, not just throw out the best 5 players. Well, we saw the last couple of nights, Washington, no one's going to compare Lincoln Kienholz to Michael Penix, who's probably the best in the sport. But Michael Penix was back there patting the football almost every play against Texas. And Washington did not have a running threat. So they knew that Penix is throwing the ball 75% of the time. And Texas has a top 2 or 3 rushing defense. So they could have pinned their ears back. So that Washington offensive line that won a Joe Moore Award, they did their job, making sure Penix was basically handing the ball to receivers 40 yards downfield. Those passes he was throwing were incredible, but he did have all day to throw practically all night. Now, we saw the flip side in the Michigan-Alabama Rose Bowl game Where Michigan, I will give this up for Ohio State in this way. When it comes to pass protection, they look far more capable than Alabama, at least for a half. For the first half, Alabama was a mess, and the Wolverines just overwhelmed them up front. But you got to credit Alabama. They made adjustments at halftime, and they figured it out, and they had time to throw the football by and large in the second half, and that's when they were able to start moving the ball.